wanted to talk about this season overall, which I think has been really one of the weaker seasons of the show. Sorry to harsh your buzz, but this has not been like TV at its greatest as far as the writing goes. I think the show's gotten very lazy. It's gotten very kind of self-congratulatory, and it's just kind of, I feel like, resting on the laurels at this point, giving people a little bit of what they expect, but also making the characters kind of dumb when the writers feel like they need to make them dumb. Like when, for plot reasons, plot at this point is ruling over characters. And at the beginning of this show, characters ruled the land. It was all about characters. The show was not about plot. The show ran at a snail's pace in the first couple seasons, and it was really what made the show kind of a phenomenon. We hadn't seen a whole lot like it. It was kind of like The Wire in the way that it was paced out. But The Wire stuck with that pace all the way through its 5 seasons, whereas Game of Thrones has become kind of like an action-adventure show at this point, and really I think the characters are being run over by the needs of the plot at this point. But first off, I want to talk about the length of the season. So HBO announced, I think it was earlier this year, might have been last year, that they were going to be basically splitting one season down the middle for the final season. It was going to be a season of 13 episodes, I guess, and they were going to split that in half. So, 13 episodes already is a pretty short season by traditional television standards, right? But for Game of Thrones, they're like, okay, we're going to split it, and we're going to do a 7-episode season, and then a 6-episode season. So the 7-episode season's already over, and it feels like the season just started. So next year's final season is going to be even worse. It's going to be over in a blink. I'm sure the episodes are probably going to be kind of bloated, and I can only imagine the series finale is probably going to be 3 hours long or something like that. So really, it'll probably be like 3 episodes in one. But still, the length of the season, I want to talk about that. This is a thing with TV now, as we've gotten away from traditional narrative television structure, and especially for shows that are not on networks, they're able to kind of mess around with how long the seasons are. And I've said many times before that I'm more in favor of fewer episodes than more episodes. But in a show like this, where there's just so much that needs to happen, I think some more episodes probably would help us. Now, would it be a lot of padding? Yes, it would, but it would also match more, the kind of pacing of the original seasons of the show. It wouldn't feel so rushed. I just feel like this whole season was so, rushed. Everything just had to... We knew where it was all going. We knew kind of how this season was going to end. But, man, they had to just, sprint out of the gate to get there. And I don't know how they're going to do... How are they going to wrap this up in 6 episodes? If you thought the pacing this season was breakneck, the next season, they're going to have the War with the White Walkers wrap up probably in 2 episodes, maybe 3 at most, and then that would leave them only 3 episodes to deal totally with the real, big conflict between, the Lannister army and, the Starks and Targaryens. That would be 3 episodes to wrap up what the entire series has been building toward. So I just don't think there's going to be enough real estate to cover all that needs to happen here. But yeah, I was looking back through on the HBO app over the weekend, just looking back through The Sopranos and the number of episodes. And I remember I thought that show really was briskly paced because it was 13 episodes a season. Every season was 13 episodes. And I remember thinking, when I first watched that show, I was like, man, this is flying, because I had really only watched shows that were 24 episodes a season. So 13 was crazy how fast things were able to happen. But then, I did remember I looked at Oz also, and I really, that's a show that I've always loved a lot. And Oz is more of a comparison to Game of Thrones just because of the number of characters that are involved in that show. But Oz only did 8 episodes a season, and that one came before The Sopranos. So in the 90s, there were some shows that were doing this kind of a very abbreviated season run. But Oz also was not popular like The Sopranos became and like Game of Thrones has become. Oz was not like a show that, tens of millions of people were watching. It was still kind of a show that was like a hidden gem, and critics loved it, and people that watched it absolutely loved it, but it wasn't like HBO's big popular series. So it makes sense that one would do fewer episodes a season. But Game of Thrones, I don't know. I just feel like they are... I don't really get why they felt like they needed to cut the seasons down so much for the final 2. Are they basically saying, we don't have anything left to do. Like we don't have much left to tell. There's nothing to do, so we're just going to cut it. I mean, that's pretty much, I feel like, what they're saying. Like they're kind of waving the white flag or something. But I feel like there's plenty left that needs to be resolved. And back in the early seasons of this show, they would just spend so much time having a conversation between two characters, and that can't happen anymore because of how smashed together everything has to be. I know the show's expensive. I think for HBO, they're spending like $10 million an episode. So for 24 episodes, over the course of 2 more seasons, I mean, it's a ton of money that they would be spending on this, and the episodes are kind of getting more special effects crazy as they go on because the White Walkers are playing more of a prominent role, and all that obviously has to be done with CGI. So it's getting to be a very expensive show, and that's probably the number one reason why. But you see the numbers. I mean, it's bringing subscribers in, at least for the time when this show is on, and Westworld was very popular too. So HBO, I think, is doing quite well right now when a lot of people thought HBO might go by the wayside with the rise of Netflix and Amazon and Hulu. But so this season, to me, overall, season 7, I told you I thought it wasn't a very good season overall. It just felt uncharacteristically nostalgic and fan servicey. A lot of the reunions and stuff like that happened this season, but I actually did like the reunions. I'm not ripping those. I'm not saying that that's why I don't think this season was very good. I think the reunions were a long time coming, and they were not cheap because they were payoffs for things that fans had wanted to see for a long time and that the show did build up. I mean, the reunion of Arya and Sansa, for example. I mean, both of them had been trying to get to Winterfell since the end of the first season. And finally, they're able to get back together. And it really, and while, it's not lovey-dovey, which made sense because these two characters don't really know each other anymore. They've spent so many years apart. Their journeys have been so different. And same for Bran. But to see them all reunite was very cool. And we're going to finally get to see Jon Snow reunite with Arya and reunite with Sansa and Bran. And that's going to be a great moment when that finally comes as well. So there's a lot of reunions still to come. But I feel like some of these reunions were just so concise. I wish they hadn't been. When Tyrion and Podrick got together, you remember how tight those guys were? I mean, Podrick had a tear in his eye when he left the cell, when Tyrion told him to leave and go off with Brienne and go off on the journey that he's been on since the 4th season. Podrick had a tear in his eye. I mean, these two guys really, they loved each other as friends. And Tyrion kind of almost raised Pod. He was a nobody, and he turned him into really one of the best squires in history, as another character says. So I would have loved to have seen them actually have a conversation. Or Tyrion and Bran. I feel like Tyrion and Bran they had a short little talk while they were walking, a little walk and talk kind of thing. But they deserved a lot more than that. I mean, Tyrion and Bran was like the ultimate bromance in the early seasons of the show. These two guys were like a match made in heaven for each other. And, if this was season 1 or 2, we would have spent 12 minutes just watching Tyrion and Bran drink wine in a brothel, spinning bullshit, not talking really about anything, but at the same time talking about everything. But, at this point in the show, they just can't do that. They don't do that anymore. We don't get to watch these long scenes of dialogue, and I think that's why I loved in the finale the scenes between Cersei and Tyrion. The scene between Cersei and Tyrion might have been the best part of the entire episode, just because when you get to watch two actors that are so good and have lived these characters for so long have a conversation, it's electric. And that's what I used to love in the older seasons of the show. My favorite episodes and my favorite scenes were always the scenes between Tyrion and Tywin. I thought those scenes were so electric, so fun to watch, because you had two actors that were just, among the best in the world and had embodied their characters so fully. Just talking. I could have listened to them talk for 45 minutes, even though it was so adversarial and negative. It just was brilliant to listen to. It was well written and well devised and well acted, and that's why I watch television, is for that kind of stuff. I don't watch television so I can see action scenes and battles and stuff like that. That's not really what I'm looking for on TV. I want to see meaningful interactions between characters that I've seen build for years and years. Anybody can do action, all right? And then the scene between Cersei and Jaime, another great scene that made a lot of sense and was a long time coming and felt like a very good payoff. And really all it was two people talking. That's it. It was just two people talking. And two people talking was what Game of Thrones specialized in the early seasons. I just feel like everything on the show is so rushed now. I mean, do you feel that way? Don't you feel like they just kind of zoom through everything now because they've got to get to the next big twist or the next big, moment that everyone's going to tweet about? The show has changed fundamentally since it started, and it's because of the pacing. It has gone from a show that was really a character-driven, dialogue-heavy kind of show to a show that's all about plot and action. And the final season, I feel like, is going to strictly be like an action show. I don't see how it can't be. And that's the thing I don't like about the White Walkers. What made the battles so great in the earlier seasons is because you had a chance at negotiations. You got to hear some of the devising and some of the strategies. Tywin would be in his tent laying out the strategies for what the Lannister army was going to do when he was fighting Robb. Those great scenes with Robb in his tent laying out what his army was going to do. The scenes of Stannis and Melisandre and Davos standing over that map at Dragonstone, talking about where they're going to go next, what they're going to do. I used to love that kind of stuff. The military strategy stuff was, I thought, a really strong point of the show. Now, I don't know how good those strategies actually were. I've heard some people kind of, like military people, have ripped the strategy, saying that no one on this show is really good at strategizing, in terms of a war. But, that's beside the point. I used to love that kind of stuff. But with the White Walkers, there's none of that because these guys don't talk. There's not going to be any sit down, let's have a negotiation. We don't get scenes of the White Walkers planning their next battle. They just kind of come in and do whatever they're going to do, and then they keep going. I mean, so it's very boring, I feel like. Anytime the White Walkers are involved, I just don't really care very much because all it's going to boil down to is a big battle. That's it. There's not going to be any strategizing. There's not going to be any talking. It's just going to be a battle. All right, who's going to kill the most people? All right, I don't really care about that. Who cares? Now, some people love those battle episodes, but to me, what made those so strong and surprising were the character moments. Like, remember the great early episode when they're having to defend King's Landing from Stannis' troops, and Tyrion goes down like on the beach and leads the charge? That was such a surprising moment because no one expected that from Tyrion. He was almost like a coward. And yet, here he goes. He picks up his axe and he goes down there and he tries to take on the Baratheon army by himself, basically leading the charge with these Lannister guys, and almost gets killed by one of his own men in the process. But it was a great moment. It was a great defining character moment for him. Or the moment when Sansa shows up and becomes an overnight badass at the Battle of the Bastards. That was a great character moment. It's one thing that I'll always remember from the show. I feel like those moments are going to be those are kind of not going to happen when we're talking about the White Walkers. And the writing has gotten to a point where I feel like it's just very lazy and predictable and makes no sense. It's like they've thrown logic out the window. Let's talk about Jon Snow for a second. So Johnny Snow, he's been saved by too many last-minute lazy writing tricks for my money over the course of this series. The guy gets saved literally at the last second at the Battle of the Bastards by Sansa. All right? Last second, literally. He would have been dead if it had been any longer. He also literally gets brought back to life in a move that everyone saw coming, but nobody really wanted to believe was happening on a show where death had always been so swift and so final. I mean, where's Melisandre been all my life? Couldn't she have been there when Ned got his head chopped off? Couldn't she have, fastened his head back on and brought him back? I mean, where's she been? She could just bring people back to life all this time? Let's undo all the stuff that's happened. Let's combine her and Bran and his time-traveling abilities and start just bringing people back to life. I mean, why not at this point? But of all the dumb ways that Jon has been saved at the last minute, the penultimate episode of this season had two of them that I think were the lamest examples of this yet. He gets saved by Daenerys, who flies in on Dragonback, and that moment to me was as bad as the show has ever been, just because it made absolutely no sense. It was a moment we've seen 100 times before, very predictable, very lazy. Here's why it was lazy. All right, you may have thought that moment was cool, but here's why it didn't work for me. And the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just like, oh my God, this is so stupid. Remember back in the days in Westeros when it took ravens days to send messages across the kingdom? And that was when the weather was nice. We just had somebody in this last episode make the remark that, well, when it's wintertime, the ravens can't fly as well. So back when the weather was nice, it took them days to deliver a message usually. Well, In the penultimate episode of this season, all in the course of a single day cycle, Gendry is able to run on foot to the wall, which I don't understand why Jon and all those other guys didn't just take off running on foot with him. They made some remark like, you're the fastest one, you've got to go. Well, he's not that much faster. I mean, it's not like Gendry's not some track star or something. This guy's been standing around he's been a blacksmith. He's not been training for a marathon or something like that. This guy, why is he the fastest one? I mean, I think all these other guys would be faster. They're like trained warriors. So that made absolutely no sense why they all didn't just run with him, because clearly he was easily able to make it to the wall with no problem. So Gendry's able to run on foot all the way to the wall. Then he's able to have a raven sent from the wall way south to Dragonstone. The raven gets there in a single day. This was like the fastest raven in the history of mankind. Daenerys is able to get the message, read the message, stop whatever it is she's doing, get on a dragon, fly all the way north of the wall, and find the exact location that Jon and the gang are standing on some rock in the middle of a frozen lake at the exact time she's needed. I mean, I don't know if I don't know if Drogon has like a GPS built into his back, and maybe the Raven included some coordinates that she needed to put in, but how did she know exactly where to go? I mean, north of the wall is fucking massive. I mean, there's no signposts or anything up there. There's no town names. It's just north of the wall is what it is. And she's never even been there. So how does she know where she's going? But she's able to get right over top of where the White Walkers are circling everyone, swoops right down and picks up Johnny and the gang, and they're able to go. Well, she didn't pick up Johnny, but she picked up the gang, and they were able to go. I mean, that moment was just so stupid to me, and it felt like something that would have been like in some Kurt Russell 1980s action movie or something like that. I mean, just so contrived, and just something that was supposed to look badass and be cool, but when you think about it logically, falls apart in 2 seconds. It was just so cheap and lazy. But then they weren't done yet. All right, so after Daenerys leaves with the gang on Dragonback, Jon still is not on top of the dragon, so he's got to get rescued again. So Uncle Benjen comes out of absolute nowhere. Where was this guy? No one's talking about him. He hasn't been mentioned in 2 seasons. He hasn't been seen at all. He just knew this was going on. He just happened to see it all happening, and he waited till the last second. Why did he wait so long? He could have come in and used his stupid, mace thing, killed a bunch of White Walkers, and then Jon could have gotten on Dragonback, and it would have saved the whole deal. But instead, he waits till the last second, rides through on his horse, and then he sacrifices himself so that Jon can live and he'll die. I mean, why did he need to sacrifice himself? Why could these 2 guys not both ride the horse? I mean, come on, this is a powerful animal. This is not, and these guys are not like the big fattest guys on the show or anything. I mean, these are 2 pretty trim guys. I mean, Benjen's been living north of the wall for how long? There's no way he's put on too much weight in that time. If anything, he's probably like a twig at this point. And Jon's a little bit petite himself, so I just didn't get it. Why did Benjen need to kill himself? Why did he need to sacrifice himself? Made no sense. But of course, for the plot, had to save Jon again. Everybody has to save Jon at the last second, and it all ends up fine in the end. So that episode was so stupid to me, and the ending of that episode was so lazily written that I'm like, man, what is this show doing? It's so ridiculous at this point. It's like they're just going for moments. They're not even trying to make sense anymore. So the finale was a better episode overall, I think, with some more satisfying payoffs and some character moves that actually did make sense, like Cersei lying about, her allegiance with Daenerys. You couldn't have believed that for a second. Jaime running away from her, that made a lot of sense as well and was a long time coming. The Starks teaming up with each other, not undercutting each other, was very well done. I would have been so disappointed if they had gone through with that whole thing with Arya and Sansa actually not trusting each other. I'm glad that in the end, the writers made the right choice there. But Bran, to me, here's my final big complaint about where Game of Thrones has gone since the early days. So Bran at this point has really just become a plot device. That's all he's become. He's not even a person anymore. He's just a device that spews important plot points. That's all he does. I mean, if his power is this immense, can't he just become something that would kill the Night King in one shot? Can't he just become something that would just kill Cersei in one shot? Can't he go into the mountain's mind? The mountain has no mind left. So, I mean, couldn't he just like warg into him? And I don't know how it works. Does he need to be like in physical contact with him? Does he need to be within 25 feet to be able to really do it? I don't get it. Or just become some kind of animal and go all the way down to King's Landing and kill Cersei. I mean, just do whatever you got to do, you know? But get it done. He seems to be the best person to do it. So he's basically at this point become a living, breathing security camera that's also always rolling and always has been rolling throughout time. I just hope that as we move on, I hope the writers don't lean on this time-traveling Bran thing anymore. I hope that's done. I think that has served its purpose. It was basically just set up so that they could tell the origin of Jon and what his true family, what his true bloodline was, and great, we got that out of the way. No one else could have done it but Bran. But what else? Like, let's not do the time travel thing anymore. It's just, again, lazy. Everyone's just supposed to believe him. That he really did see this stuff. I don't know. It's stretching a lot of the credibility for me at this point. I don't understand how it works, and it hasn't really been explained too well as far as how it works. He's able to just go back to any moment in any time just at the snap of a finger, and it's too much. Too much for me. I could go with the getting in the brains of animals and stuff like that, but I don't know about just traveling back in time to passively watch things that happen throughout history. It's just a little much for me. So that's my take on Game of Thrones Season 7 and the finale, which, as I said, aired last night when I'm recording this. I'd love to know your thoughts on it. If you have any, send me an email at theclintdavis@gmail.com, THE, clintdavis@gmail.com.